We love the 7 deadly sins and you should too. Last time we covered Meliodas, the dragon's sin of wrath, so now it's time to talk about Bon, the fox's sin of greed. Just like Meliodas, this video will contain many spoilers, including a full spoiler version of his origin story as shown in the show. So, once again, leave if you don't want the show to be spoiled by the following spoilers. And I will be including information found both in the manga and the anime. So let's dive into the fox's sin of greed, Bon the Immortal. Bon's story begins about 30 years ago as an abused child, surviving through stealing from others, only to be often caught and beat by his victims. Eventually, Bon was caught and sent to Aberdeen prison, where a man offered him some food, which Bon eagerly took and ate. This man's name was Zhivago, and after helping Bon escape the prison, he let Bon live in his hideout. Zhivago would feed Bon whenever they met, but eventually, Bon was kidnapped and was to be sold to Lord Roxanu. But luckily he was saved once again by Zhivago, who just happened to be robbing the cargo that Bon was on. Bon asked Zhivago to show him how to steal, and after being warned of the dangers of such a life, Zhivago began to teach Bon to steal just like he did. It was during this time that Zhivago would tell Bon stories, one of which being about the Fountain of Youth and its guardian saint. One day, Bon was going to meet Zhivago, but got bored and decided to steal on his own. But unfortunately, he was caught by Lord Roxanu's guards and ruthlessly beaten. Zhivago saw this, but decided to save his true son instead of Bon, hoping that Bon would eventually forgive him for this hard choice he had to make. 10 years later, Bon, now known as Bandit Bon, began his search for the Fountain of Youth in the Fairy King's forest. After climbing the gigantic tree within the forest, Bon finds the seemingly abandoned Fountain of Youth. As he tried to take the cup from it, Elaine, the guardian of the fountain, appears and proceeds to launch Bon off the tree and back into the forest in order to protect the fountain from the bandit. The very stubborn yet surprisingly relaxed Bon made many attempts back up the tree, only to be thrown off time and time again. After many attempts, Bon reaches the top and whips out his 3-section staff and appears to attack Elaine, only to manipulate his staff to grab the cup containing the water from the fountain. As he began to take a sip, Elaine immediately commands the tree's roots to trap Bon, preventing him from drinking from the Fountain of Youth. She then tells Bon to leave and never return, and Bon agrees and says that he will go. Skeptical from this response, Elaine reads Bon's mind, only to learn that Bon has no malicious intent and was being honest when he said that he would leave. Elaine released Bon from the trap and asked him his reason for seeking the fountain. Bon told her that he had a terrible life and believed that if he lived long enough that maybe eventually something good would come his way. The two spent some time together after this until Bon exclaimed that she was just too much for him and left. However, to Elaine's surprise, Bon returned with his ale label collection book that he had dropped after being thrown off the tree. The two spent the next 7 days together, growing closer, and the two began to have feelings for one another. Elaine expressed her feelings of wanting to leave the fountain with Bon, and Bon offered to steal her and make him his to make her wish come true. Elaine unfortunately refused, saying that she had to protect the fountain. So instead, Bon offered to find King, her brother, so that he may take her place as guardian and allow her to be able to leave the fountain. Upon hearing this, Elaine hugged Bon in the happiness of hearing him say those words. However, things took a quick turn for the worst, and a red demon appeared and began burning the Fairy King's forest. Protecting Elaine, Bon tells her to go drink the water from the fountain while he holds off the demon. He takes out his 3-section staff and immediately rips out the heart of the demon, turning to Elaine with a sense of victory, only to see a terrified look on her face as she tells him that the demon has more than one heart, and it swipes at Bon and Elaine, mortally wounding both of them. Elaine tries to get Bon to drink the water again, but he refuses and tells her that she should drink it instead. So, Elaine fills her mouth with the water and kisses Bon, forcing him to drink the water instead, thus making him immortal. Immediately recovering from his wounds, he gets Elaine to safety and begins to unleash his anger upon the demon, swiftly killing it. And as Elaine lay dying in Bon's arms, Bon promised that he would definitely make her his. And unfortunately, Elaine passed away. Time would pass on, and Bond would be put on death's row for seemingly destroying the Fairy King's forest, drinking from the fountain, and killing Elaine. As they asked Bandit Bond for any last words before being executed, Bond simply told them that they got his name wrong. It wasn't Bandit Bond, it was Bond the Undead. Bond would then live through 33 total executions, none of which were successful since Bond was now immortal. And one day, Meliodas went to see Bond in jail and asked him to join the 7 deadly sins. Bond refused, saying that there was no longer anything left for him outside of this cell, and so Meliodas told him that he would take him out by force. And Meliodas did as such, as he punched Bond through the wall of the cell holding him. Energized with excitement that he had finally found an equal rival to fight with, Bond agreed to join Meliodas on the terms that they could continue their fights. While a part of the 7 deadly sins, after one of their missions, Bond began to take interest in Meliodas' sword, as the captain never let the sword out of his sight. When Bond tried to steal it from Meliodas, he immediately attacked him, giving him a gashing wound on the left side of his neck that would become Bond's only scar. Later, after being framed for the murder of the great holy knight Zarathos, the 7 deadly sins split up, and eventually Bond would let himself be captured by the Weird Fangs, who imprisoned him, took his sacred treasure, and tortured him for years. That was until he learned that Meliodas was alive, and upon learning this, Bond broke himself out of prison and joined up with his captain. Now, Bond's ability is Snatch, which allows him to steal physical objects and also physical attributes from others, draining them of their strength and speed and making it his own. He sometimes uses this for his own amusement, as at one point he sapped King and Deanne of some of their strength in a fight against some vampires, and then he just sat back and laughed watching them struggle. In regards to having powers, Bond has immense strength and speed, which is displayed whenever he fights, and even more so whenever he fights Meliodas. And of course, he has the power of immortality and very fast healing, allowing him to sustain and recover from injuries during battle, and allowing him to be, well, immortal. Also, it should be noted that since Bond drank from the fountain at age 23, he will always look like he's age 23. But chronologically at this point, he is 43 years old. Bond's main weapon is the 3-section staff, and while he is very proficient at wielding the staff as a weapon, he also utilizes it to use his snatch ability to steal physical objects, such as stealing the cup at the Fountain of Youth. His sacred treasure is the Chorushaus, which is a 4-section staff gifted to him by the King of Leonis. Unfortunately, his sacred treasure was stolen upon capture by the Weird Fangs, and he has yet to retrieve it. Bond has said that only 2 people in his life have ever treated him like an actual person and not a criminal. Those 2 people being Elaine and Meliodas, and this makes the 2 of them extremely important to him and key people in his life. Elaine being shown as his love interest, and Meliodas being his respected captain. And as the show progresses, he begins to gain tremendous respect for Hawk, Captain of Scrap Disposal, and the 2 of them would become trustworthy companions. King and Bond also have a complicated relationship, if you want to call it that. It went from King being mad at Bond for stealing toys from kids in the past, to wanting to kill him for what he did to his sister in the fairy forest under false knowledge, to fighting side by side after learning the truth and upon Elaine's request. And that is some information behind the Fox's Sin of Greed, Bond the Immortal. Hope you guys enjoyed hearing some about him. Next up will be King, the Grisly Sin of Sloth. I'm Dan with Comic TV, and I will see you guys next time.